The whole idea about them wanting to be happy and not suffer, and whether it's coming from their side, trying in their confused way to do that, or me projecting all sorts of meaning on what I think they're doing to try to be happy. It opens up my heart a little bit to kind of meeting them where they are, because when I'm angry, I don't want to meet anybody where they are. I want them to change so that I can be comfortable in being with them. And that, this has been my whole story. So putting them in the category with me, my confused way to wanting to be happy and not suffer, they're doing their own unique way of trying to do that. So getting them out of there and putting them next to me makes it more open, more meetable.
Okay. So instead of having a rigid enemy category, taking that person out of the category, seeing that they're like you, wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer, confused like you, doing what they think is going to bring them happiness. And then that enables you to meet them with where they are, instead of saying, I'm only going to meet you if you come over to where I am. Yeah, it's true. We demand that people come over to where we are a lot, don't we? Yeah, and that really makes relationships with them can be quite touchy then. Yeah, because if I always like switching the situations. My mother always said, put yourself in the other person's shoes. But if you do that, how do we feel when somebody else says, I'm not going to meet you where you are, you have to be what I want you to be first? What do we do? What do you do?
We get angry.
Yeah, we get angry back, don't we? Yeah, or we leave. It's like, get me out of here. Yeah? So you can see that, putting people in an enemy category and having certain demands or expectations from them is making not only their life harder, but our own life harder. Isn't it? Yet when we're angry, we feel so powerful. Yeah, I am so powerful when I'm angry. There's a real hit, a real buzz we get out of being angry. Yeah.
I'm in charge of my life, and I'm in charge of your life too.
Right. That's exactly it. I'm in charge of my life, and I'm in charge of your life. And yet, so often when we're angry, what we're really wanting is to be close to the person. Isn't it? Yeah. Because most of the people that we get the most angry at are the people we care about the most. Yeah. And so often our anger is a very distorted way of trying to say, I care about you. Yeah. But it brings the opposite result from what we want, because it pushes other people away. Mm-hmm. Tarpa, you had something?
Well, that made all I think I got to, but then I couldn't quite resolve the change in the level of trust I had.
Okay, so you were kind of able to take somebody out of the enemy category, but not resolve the level, change the level of trust. Sometimes, feeling equanimity doesn't mean that we trust everybody in the same way. It doesn't mean we act the same way towards everybody. We still have social roles, we still have past experiences, we still have different relationships that have different conventional expectations, So you may have equanimity for a 2-year-old, but you're not going to trust them with a book of matches. Yeah, you may cultivate equanimity for somebody who is racist. Yeah, but if you belong to the category that they're against, you're not necessarily going to trust them to treat you equally. Okay? So the idea is that we give people the level of trust that they can bear. And different people can bear different levels of trust. And people can bear can bear trust in different areas, in one area of their life, but not in another area of their life. So we still have to have our wisdom around us, yeah, even though we may have equanimity towards others and have an open-hearted concern, still we approach people differently according to their characteristics and the type of trust and level of trust they're able to bear. Okay?
I think because I have that kind of not worked out right, that's what leads to the things that are unmet that lead me to put them in the category.
Right, yeah. It's very true. Often when we give people more trust than they can bear, then when they can't bear it, we put them in the enemy category. Isn't it? Yeah? Whereas if we were able to look at them beforehand and kind of say, well, how much, first of all, what area in life am I trusting them in? And second of all, how much trust in this area can they bear? And then if we have that kind of reasonable expectation, then we're less likely to be disappointed and toss them in the enemy category as a result. Now, still, there are times when we may have reasonable expectations of people because we've gone through this thing of how much trust and in what areas can they bear. But people make mistakes. Yeah, we like to think of ourselves as trustworthy people, but I'm sure if we all look in our past, there are times when we were anything but trustworthy, that we said we would do something and we didn't, or we, committed in one way and then we didn't follow through, or, we got overwhelmed with our own negative emotion and couldn't be the kind of person we wanted to be in that situation. So if we know that we have foibles and weaknesses, and sometimes, we think we can be like this, but the situation happens and we can't be, and yet we can forgive ourselves because we understand ourselves and our predicament, then we can have that same way of giving somebody else a break. And okay, I sussed out the situation. I thought I could trust them in this way and this way. And generally they are trustworthy, but at this time, boy, in this area, they completely did something that I didn't expect. And maybe even that they didn't expect. Yeah. And so it's this whole thing of having some mental flexibility in our attitude. Because we all want to put things in nice categories and have everything planned out so we know exactly what's going to happen so that we feel secure. Yeah, don't we? We plan everything sometimes to the utmost detail in an attempt to feel secure. And, one thing that I've learned from my teacher is as soon as you have a plan, you know what isn't going to happen. Yeah. And so we need to have some kind of mental flexibility. Otherwise, our entire life, we're going to be constantly banging up against our expectations, which we confused with objective reality. Right? We thought our expectations were the actual objective reality, the way things should be. And then, of course, when they turn out not to be like that, whammo. And then we get angry, we toss people in the enemy category, yeah, and then things devolve from there. Yeah. Whereas if we can have some kind of, mental flexibility where we we have to have some plans and some expectations and some levels of different things. But there's always a caveat in our mind of, but sentient beings do what sentient beings do. And they're unpredictable. And they're under the influence of afflictions and karma. So things just may not work out this way. Yeah, and if they don't, rather than get angry at them, then let me learn something more so that in the future I can refine my ability to trust, to see what kind of trust people can bear, or refine my ability to have reasonable expectations. Yeah. But I think you made a very good point there, is that often we give people more, we're confused, so we trust people in areas that maybe they aren't so trustworthy, and then we get angry at them afterwards. Yeah. Whereas if we just, when we get angry, if we just take a step back and say, oh, but part of that was due to my misjudgment. Yeah. It's also due to my misjudgment, It's not some kind of hard and fast concrete rule that this person has to behave this way. Yeah. Sage?
Well, I was wondering in terms of equanimity, does that sense of trusting others, giving others responsibility, having expectations of them, does that kind of like blur the equanimity a little bit in terms of, you're making expectations, you're giving responsibilities, you have this connection where if I try to view people with equanimity, I'm not going to give somebody I don't know well the keys to my car or my apartment, but I can still be in that sense of equanimity for them. And so I just kind of hear the lines being blurred a little bit in terms of trust and responsibility.
Okay, yeah, so are we blurring the lines of trust and responsibility when we have equanimity? I don't think we have to. Okay? In other words, like you said, you're not going to give a stranger the keys to your car. That's wise. Yeah, that's wise. It doesn't mean that you have to lack equanimity for them. You still want them to be happy and be free of suffering in the same way as you want your friend who you will give the keys to your car to be happy and free from suffering. So the equanimity is on an emotional level. How you act to somebody is on a practical level. Okay? So you can feel the equanimity, but act differently. Okay? So like I was saying with the 2-year-old, you want the 2-year-old to be happy and free of suffering as much as you want the 40-year-old to be happy and free of suffering. But that doesn't mean you're going to give the 2-year-old a box of matches. Yeah, because they don't know what to do with they don't know how to keep safe with matches. The 40-year-old does. That doesn't mean you're biased and partial towards the 40-year-old wanting them to have more happiness than you want the 2-year-old to have. It's because you want the 2-year-old to have a happiness that you don't give them the matches. Okay? So in the same way with trusting people, in different areas, if somebody isn't trustworthy in one area, then let's not give them the trust in that area. That doesn't mean we don't wish them to be happy or we want them to suffer. If we're still clinging on to the idea of they should be trustworthy in this area, but I'm not going to trust them because they've always let me down because they're scum, then there's the equanimity's lacking. Okay? But if we just equally see, we want them to be happy, but this area is not a strong point. I mean, don't trust me to fly a jet and take you from Spokane to New York. that isn't, yeah, you may trust me in many others areas of my life, but don't trust me to pilot a jet. Yeah, that doesn't mean you don't want me to be happy. It doesn't mean you cherish the pilot more than you cherish me. Yeah, it just means that you're smart. And you have your senses, Yeah.
I found just being here with my roommate
Mm-hmm.
has been an excellent practice because we can't talk.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to make sure that I don't put her in the enemy category or the friend category and continually just trying to be equanimous.
Mm-hmm. Equanimous.
Yes. But in a sense, it's very powerful to try to stay in that spot
Mm-hmm.
when you don't know the person at all.
Yeah, yeah. So it's quite a practice, and that's why I think being in a situation like this, you see everything as part of your practice. Like you were saying, sharing a room with somebody who you don't know at all, you can't talk to, and yet you want them to be peaceful and happy. You don't want to disturb them when they're sleeping or whatever. Yeah. So you're trying to figure out what you can do. Are they a light sleeper? Are they a sound sleeper? These kinds of things, but without talking to them. But what it becomes is a real practice of your mindfulness and compassion towards the other person. Because you want them to be happy. You have compassion. You don't want them to suffer and want them to be free of their suffering. So therefore you're going to be mindful about how you move in the bedroom because you're aware that your actions affect somebody else. That doesn't mean you have to become skittishly self-conscious, of like, okay, I took a step in the room, is that going to wake them up? Are they going to get mad about that? It doesn't mean we have to go to the other extreme and become self-conscious and skittish. But, it just means that we care. We have the level of mindfulness that we have. Sometime the roommate later may say, oh, I wish you had done that, and it's something you never thought of. But that's okay. Then we learn from it. So, yeah.
One of the things when I was doing the equanimity, what I found was that people who are either geographically farther away or they don't really directly affect my life, but I have them in the enemy category, that it was easier to develop equanimity towards them as opposed to people who are closer to me geographically, as well as they somehow affect my life more directly. So that was a little more challenging.
Yeah. Okay, so there may be people in the enemy category, like, let's say, politicians, we don't know them, they live far away, They actually do affect our life quite dramatically, but not on a personal level because everybody's experiencing the result of their actions. So those people, it might be easier to nudge towards the equanimity category. But somebody who we know, who we see actually, and there's a physical location, closeness, and where they might affect our life, maybe not even as dramatically as a politician would, but it's our life and not the lives of our neighbors and our friends. Okay, it's more about what you're doing to me, not what you're doing to an amorphous us who happen to be your constituents. Okay, and so what you're doing to me then becomes really big. Okay, so you can see in this our talk about equanimity and bias and partiality, how much the word me and I comes up, and how it's so much harder to shift somebody who's in the stranger category, but kind of in the enemy category too, to move them really in, to have a feeling of equanimity when their actions affect us personally and not other people too. Okay? Because it's all about me, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add something to that. It was, so what I found was happening with, those who are closer.
Yeah.
Is that like this mind kept coming saying, but, like it kept resisting wanting to do it. So there's like this resistance.
Okay, so the people who harm you directly, the mind has much more resistance. Okay.
It sees the logic of it, it's just more resistant.
Yeah, we can see the logic, it's more resistant. Okay, what's coming up here is the difficulty to forgive. Isn't that what it is? Yeah, to move somebody that we know personally from the stranger category to from the enemy category to have equanimity for them entails the ability to forgive. Yeah, and sometimes it's very difficult for us to let go of our anger. Yeah, we form an image of somebody based on something that they did for a limited amount of time, and we think that that's all they are, who they are, how they're always going to treat us forever. So therefore, they're never trustworthy in any areas, at any time. Yeah, they are always worthy of my hate, even though I hate to think that I hate people. Maybe then we say, oh, I don't hate them, I'm just irritated at them. But I just don't want to speak to them again. I don't want them in my life. But I don't hate them. Yeah, because we don't like to think of ourselves as people who have hate, do we? We don't like to think of that. But there's definitely some resistance there, because it really, because as soon as the self is involved, everything becomes so blown out of proportion important. Yeah, that this kind of resistance comes, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, if you heard what people did to me and the pain they caused me, you wouldn't have any anger towards them or any feeling of vengeance, or even if something came up and I was your friend and so you didn't like them treating your friend that way, then you could still get over that anger, But if the same person did the same behavior but it was directed towards you, yeah, then I could say, oh, Cheryl, just, forget it, don't be angry, And you'd go, Okay? So the ability to forgive is something really important in our lives. Yeah? And I think forgiveness is something that we do to the main beneficiary of our forgiveness is us. The main beneficiary of our forgiveness is ourselves. Yeah? Why? Because we're the ones who's suffering the most when we are angry, when we want revenge. Yeah? The other person is off doing what they're doing. Maybe they know we're angry, maybe they're not even aware we're angry. Yeah? But we're the ones who replay the situation again and again and again ad nauseum in our mind, reinforcing that feeling and reinforcing our own suffering because of it. So forgiving is actually something that benefits us more than the other person. Because I think forgiving simply means we release our anger. That's all. We release our anger. Cindy?
I was just wondering, so if we, is the intention to drop the categories and in developing equanimity, move more towards seeing all sentient beings as our brothers and sisters?
Okay, so there's different ways to do this. One way of looking at it, we can say, yeah, let's just drop the category and see everybody as like ourselves. Yeah? Wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer. We could say like our brothers and sisters. That depends how well you get along with your brothers and sisters. Okay? Yeah, or we could say, another way to say it is, conventionally speaking, people may have enemies, you know, or they may have friends, but they don't have attachment and anger towards those two different categories. So, for example, we could say, like with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, you know, maybe the Chinese Communist Party, somebody could say that was His Holiness's enemy. You know? Yeah. But that doesn't mean that His Holiness, you know, hates those people or wishes them to suffer or wishes them not to be, you know, regards them as differently than he does others. Still the feeling, what you wish for the other person is different. So some people may say, yeah, you can continue to use those categories simply because of the social roles somebody's in. And another person could say, well, maybe I feel better, let's just drop those categories and let's just label people sentient beings and leave it at that. Yeah. I mean, the fact is that we are closer to some people than to others, and that some people from their side may help or harm us more than other people do. That's true. Okay? But that doesn't mean our feelings towards them have to depend on whether they help or harm us. You see, that's where we bite the hook, where we make our feelings dependent on how they treat us. Because when we make our feelings, and we all do this, don't we? And actually we're brought up to do this. We're taught to do this as children. And we also do it naturally. You know, we don't even need to be taught. That how we feel about somebody should depend on how they treat us. And yet, you know, let's question that. Why? Why should how we feel about somebody depend on how they treat us? You know, this is what I like about Dharma practice. You question all these assumptions that you didn't even know you had. You know, and then finally you realize you have them, and then you say, well, why? You know, why should I do that? Yeah, maybe originally it was a basic survival need for people who are very attached to themselves.
Well, I'm just thinking caveman type issues and people banding every day.
Yeah, yeah. So, but still, even as cavemen, you know, still maybe you could have equal equanimity for everybody. You know, you realize, okay, these people over there might clobber me. These people are going to help me. Yeah. So you might still have those categories of, okay, towards these people I have to act one way, towards these people I can act another way. But on a feeling level, you know, maybe a wise cave person could have equanimity. Yeah. See, this is something that makes the difference between a human being and an animal, is that we human beings can learn to transform our emotions and question the assumptions that underlie our emotions. Animals can't. I don't know if cave people can. Yeah? But animals, you know, you can't teach them to question these things. Yeah, it's just this natural instinct. I think that's very much what you were saying, Mark. It's just this natural instinct of, yeah, you know, someone's nice, so I wag my tail, and someone's not nice, and I bark. Yeah. So if I don't have a tail, then I wave my hand. But I still bark. Yeah, but I think one quality as a human being is to begin to ask ourselves why. Why do I need to be angry at people who treat me in XYZ way? We just take it for granted that we need to be angry, and that anybody, any reasonable person would be angry and should be angry. And if they weren't angry, they were going to get taken advantage of. Yeah? What was the name of the priest? Father Boyle? Gregory Boyle. So he wrote this beautiful book that I recommend called Tattoos on the Heart. And he was working with inner city youth in the Los Angeles area. And somebody once said to Father Gregory, aren't you letting those kids, because he was dealing with gang members, aren't you letting them take advantage of you? And he said, no, I'm giving my advantage away. Yeah? That's a koan that I'm still contemplating, I gave my advantage away. In other words, I'm not framing the relationship with the requirements that you have to act this and this and this way to be worthy of my affection or worthy of my kindness. And I think that kind of ability is if you look, who are the people that we most respect? What is the way of treating others that the people we most admire have? Yeah, I don't know about you, but for me, the quality of being able to give unconditional affection is a tremendous quality. And when I'm in the very rare times when I'm with somebody who can give unconditional affection, then I really relax and I feel safe, because I know I don't have to prove myself, I don't have to fulfill, twist myself and contort myself to become something for somebody else, that they care for me no matter how I act. And for me, that doesn't mean I'm just going to go acting any old way, but it means that I can relax, and if I make a mistake, I don't have to get anxious that this person's going to throw me out. Yeah? It means that there's some space in the relationship to account for more my foibles. Yeah. So for me, those people who can give me that space, because from their side, they have unconditional love. Yeah. Then that is, I think, one of the most beautiful gifts somebody can give, is to give us that kind of space. So in the same way, if we can work with our minds to give other people that kind of space, it would be really wonderful, wouldn't it? Yeah? And, yeah. Okay? And so having that ability means, somebody who has that ability isn't always discriminating everything in terms of how it relates to themselves. And their emotions are not depending upon how other people treat them. Because when our emotions are depending on how other people treat us, then we don't have so much control or power to change our emotions, do we? If every time somebody criticizes me, I have no choice but to get angry, because you're supposed to get angry when people criticize you. You're supposed to hate people who talk badly about you. And anyway, forget the supposed to's. I do hate them and get angry at them. Then who's suffering? Who's in prison by that? It's me, isn't it? I'm in my own psychological prison of giving myself no alternative emotions to have once in the confront of criticism. Which means that I'm giving away my power to be happy. Because my ability to be happy depends on other people treating me nicely, and I cannot control how other people treat me. That's a fact of life, isn't it? I cannot control how other people treat me. But if when other people treat me this way or they treat me that way, and I have no internal choice, then I am giving up my power. Yeah? And I'm putting myself in an emotional prison. Okay? So it takes, a lot of effort and also time for us to be able to step back from this knee-jerk reaction of somebody's criticizing or I'm perceiving this as threat to instant anger. So whether the anger is coming from our amygdala or whether it's coming from our, preconceptions, still, the thing is, can we step back and just say, even though the anger may flash there, say, do I want to follow this? Is it necessary that I continue this emotion? Am I totally a victim of this emotion? Yeah? Because when we say that I have no choice but to get angry, then we're making ourselves into a victim, aren't we? Because a victim doesn't have choice. Yeah? So we have to create that kind of space in there to feel our own ability to choose. And that takes some time and it takes some effort because we have a whole lot of habit of somebody criticizes, boing, I get angry. Yeah? Hold on. I had an interesting experience the other day. I was working on this manuscript. Okay, so Russ had sent it to me. I opened up the file. I started working on the file, and I saved it, forgetting that I was working on the file that was attached to an email. And if I save it, it doesn't save the changes. So about 2 hours of work was out the window. Okay, now, a while ago, I would have been really upset because I treasure my time. My time is my most important thing, And I just wasted 2 hours and this ridiculous computer. And why didn't these people make it so that if you open it as the attachment to an email that they make you save it on your hard disk before you save it? Or why don't they warn you? Or, it's all their fault. Yeah, and if it wasn't their fault, it should have been Russ's fault. He should have told me to do that, and gotten really angry, or I would have gotten really upset because this has happened to me before and I forgot. And look how stupid I am. I did it again. This happened once before. I still haven't learned. I forgot to save it on the hard disk. I am really stupid and, I'm beyond hope and this, just forget it, and gotten really bummed out. Okay? And it was very interesting. I was quite kind of pleasantly pleased, and happy to find that this happened, and I wasn't angry about it. I mean, Donnie and I were working in the forest. I mentioned it to her, but I didn't sound particularly angry. I just said this happened. And it was like, oh, okay, something's working in practice. There's some space. I don't have to get angry and bummed out. Yeah? So so this is just, one area we can get angry at. But, there's so many other areas like that, to give ourselves some space and see. Cindy?
I was just wondering how equanimity was related to the Bodhisattva vow to not criticize others.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how's equanimity related to the Bodhisattva vow not to criticize others? Okay, first of all, we have to understand that vow properly. Then we also have to understand equanimity. So equanimity is, we want everybody, we want people to be happy and free of suffering equally. That's what equanimity is. Now, let's say somebody is doing something that's very, very harmful to them, and to themselves and other people. And if you told somebody else that this person is doing that behavior, if you told them, that person could help them. Okay? Now, one way of seeing this could be you're criticizing this person to that person. So you're telling that person everything this person's doing wrong. But why are you telling them that? So that that person can help them. You're not telling them that to win this person on your side so they're just as angry against that person as you are. Okay? So this is where equanimity is quite important, yeah? Because when the Bodhisattva vow is talking about not criticizing others, it means with anger, with the intention to get other people on our side and turn them against the person we're angry at. Or when we criticize somebody directly, it's with the intention to hurt their feelings. Okay? But there are ways of quote, quote, criticism, where you're revealing somebody's fault, but your motivation is entirely different. Sometimes you really want somebody, you care about somebody, and so you give them feedback that might initially be difficult for them to hear. You criticize them, but you're doing it because you care about them. Or you might criticize them behind their back by telling somebody else. But again, your motivation is to get that person involved in helping them. And I remember one time, many, many years ago, I was living at a Dharma center, and Lama Yeshe came because he wasn't living at any of the centers. He only visited them. So whenever he came somewhere, he needed to find out what's going on with everybody so he would know how to help different people. So he asked me how so-and-so was. Yeah, and actually so-and-so was not behaving in a way that, some of the other people thought was very good. They were doing something that we thought was not very good, and and so I had heard all this about, not criticizing somebody, and then not, trying to separate a teacher and their student, and these kinds of things. So I just kind of hemmed and hawed, and, I don't really want to say Lama. And he finally said to me, no, you have to tell me. It's not criticizing this person. You have to tell me because I need to know so that I can benefit the people in this center. Yeah? So it made a strong impression on me. Yeah? That there, you can say things, reveal people's faults, but you're doing so without anger and with the intention actually to help them. And that's not criticism, and it's not a violation of equanimity. Okay, it's not reducing your equanimity. Yeah, reducing your equanimity would be, this person is doing something wrong, and I can't wait to tell so-and-so. Because then so-and-so is going to, go tell them to stop acting that way. Or so-and-so is going to join my side of the conflict and validate my position against, this person. So that would be lacking equanimity. And that would also be creating a lot of negative karma. Yeah.
Yeah, when you go to criticize someone, I would think you'd have to have at least a factor of trust in that criticism, because some people can take criticism better than others and have different abilities. So you can't, when I criticize someone, if I try to do it mindfully, I have to think of, whether or not they can handle it, and if they can't, then it's really counterproductive sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So when we need to give somebody some negative feedback, we really need to consider who we're talking to, what kind of dispositions they have. Will they be able to hear it the way we intend it? Yeah, because if they can hear it, and we've thought about that well, then our criticism or our negative feedback can be very productive. But if we don't consider the other person's ability to handle it, it can be very counterproductive. Yeah. But then also what's interesting is sometimes you know a person well, and you know they're going to get angry when you tell them something. But you also know they're going to go away and think about it. So that's when you really have to bring forth your compassion. Because you're risking their turning against you. But you're risking it because you think in the end of the day, giving this feedback will benefit them. Yeah.
When you do that, I'm thinking about my wife and my son. And for me, it's really difficult once I say something, and there is this reaction, and if they're not to continue explaining the criticism, just leaving it right there.
Right.
Giving them time to think about it.
Right.
And act on it on their own.
Yeah.
Coercion.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes we give the feedback, the other person reacts negatively. And it's really most appropriate for us just to leave that, let them digest it, come back later and talk with them about their response. But as soon as we get some kind of negative reaction from them, then we get on the defensive and we want to explain ourselves. And we explain and explain and explain. And it just actually makes the other person more angry. Yeah? So that's coming from us, isn't it? We're on the defensive. It's like, I know I said something you don't like, but please don't hate me because of it. I want your approval. So I explain myself ad nauseum. Yeah? When really, sometimes the best thing is just let them think about it and then come back later and say, how did you take that? What did that mean to you? Yeah. And if you have any doubts about my motivation, here's how I meant it. Okay? Communication takes a lot of thought and sensitivity. We usually think communication is opening our mouth. Just opening our mouth and saying vocalizing whatever thought happens to be in our mind is not necessarily productive communication, is it? Yeah, when to communicate with somebody, we really have to think about, what kind of disposition do they have? What kind of person are they? What are their areas of sensitivity? What is the best way to say this? And so that's why, when we talk about the qualities of the Buddha, the 10 powers of the Buddha, one of them is the Buddha's ability to know sentient beings' different dispositions and also their different inclinations. So this might be their inclinations and dispositions for, whether they want to seek arhatship or full enlightenment, but it also would include their different dispositions and inclinations to how to lead them in a skillful way. Because with one sentient being, acting in one way is really skillful, but with another sentient being, that same behavior is just totally counterproductive. So to really help others, we need to develop that kind of sensitivity and ability, to get ourselves out of the way so that we can really tune in to what's happening with others, and so that our help can achieve the benefit that we want it to, even if it means that sometimes the other person's angry at us. Yeah. Okay, let's just have some, we have about 20 minutes left. Let's just have some time of silent meditation, okay? Let's review some of the points and things that you can meditate on, okay? So you can do some more thought on what does equanimity actually mean? And what's the relationship between being equanimous and trusting somebody? And then maybe look at some situations in which you've given people more trust than they can deserve, that they can warrant, not that they deserve, but that they can warrant in a certain area, and how that's led to anger, and seeing how that's happened, seeing that mechanism, then that might help you soften your anger towards the other person. Okay. Or you could think about this thing about criticism. What does it mean to criticize? What does it mean to give negative feedback? What are examples in my life where I've criticized with a negative intention, and what's been the result? What about when I've given feedback with a positive intention? What's been the result? Yeah. Or to look at another topic, is to look at how we get defensive when we feel people, don't like us. Or another topic is to look at how we just react with anger without giving ourselves any alternative emotions, such as equanimity or compassion, to react with when somebody criticizes us. Okay, what other things did I talk about that you can
Why should I treat people based on how they treat me?
Yeah, why should I treat people or feel about people based on how they treat me? Why should my feelings of affection or no affection depend on how they treat me? Other points? Okay, unconditional love. Yep. And what that means and how can we create it. And also forgiveness. Yeah. What does it mean to forgive, and who do we need to forgive? Okay. So let's just have some time of silent meditation where you could take one of these different things and really think about it and make examples from your life and see if you can use those different ways of looking at things to loosen the negative emotions and create space in your mind and develop your own good qualities.